Okay, kids. It's 2:01 now, and if you know another Division 8 member who's shy or not a friend of technology that might benefit from joining us, try and get a hold of them and help them join Zoom. You know, some people are shy about the fact that they are not technologically inclined, but still would like some fellowship. So if you know somebody like that, reach out to them and get them on to Zoom. So with that said, we're going to mute everybody, and then we're going to unmute Paul Downs, and he'll share his projects with us.
Okay. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about some shotgun houses, Camelbacks, double shotguns that I built for a little Fremo in module that we started working on back before all of this stuff hit, but it's given us a lot of time now to move on. So we all know what shotguns and Camelbacks look like. They're downtown. First thing I always like to do a project like this is to go and take a lot of reference photos so I can get an idea, get a feeling for what I'm going to be doing. Architectural details, general construction details, so I can try to make them look as realistic as possible. So took a lot of pictures. This is down around Washington Street, Butchertown area, Parristown area, things like that. So I did look online and pulled up a couple little plans just to get some general ideas. I also went online and used, like, you could use Google Earth, something like that, to measure the actual size of the buildings. There's also that Logic program that Metro government uses for doing building permits and things like that. So that's really great too. You can go down and measure lots and see how big things really are. And then over on the right-hand side here, you can see the some of the drawings I used. This is a consumer-grade house design program. It's called Live 3D. It's for Mac. You can probably find some very similar for PCs. It's about $50. And I use it when I'm helping contractors with their permits, if I need to draw something out, do an elevation drawing, something like that. So I drew these houses full size in this program, and then I sent them to PDF and then put them into a program that Apple has called Pages. It's a word processing program, but it does a really great job with graphics. And I resized those PDFs to be in scale. So then I can take my measurements right off of these drawings. And basically I made 3 different styles. I have Camelbacks, shotguns, and double shotguns. And as in most neighborhoods, you usually have 1 or 2 contractors doing most of the work. So in this neighborhood, one contractor was building all of the Camelbacks. So they're all very, very similar. And the other contractor was building the shotguns and double shotguns. So they are also very similar. Some tools that I use, this is the duplicator. This is great for putting in a sheet of styrene and cutting it into nice pieces. It's really nice. You can set this up one time and then cut all the pieces you need, so you don't have to keep measuring. Another one I use here is the chopper, and you can see that I've put in a couple of little stops here so that I can chop off this little angle right here for that corner of the roof. And this chopper, I use it all the time. You can see my my cuts into the mat. I just found out that I had another mat. I've had it for a couple of years, forgot I had it, but I've replaced this mat since. I'm starting to cut all the pieces out. You can see the measurements I've taken. And this other tool here, this dial caliper, a metal dial caliper, not plastic, it's got to be metal. For the next thing I'm going to show you, this is an indispensable tool. So these are the things I use the most. Going to be the duplicator, the chopper, and this dial caliper. And here's a stack of building parts for the Camelbacks, it looks like. So when I put a door or a window in, this is how I like to do it. I will first measure the inside opening of that. This is a door in this case, and get the opening for that door. And I do my math over here, and I say how far in from the edge of the wall, the corner of the wall, do I want to put that door, and make a little mark. And you can see this is scribed right here because that metal tip will scribe that plastic really nicely. And then it makes it much easier to take that X-Acto blade and cut those doors open. So this is how I find the location for all the doors and windows, and it makes them to be very standard after that. So again, I open the dowel caliper from the distance from the edge of the wall I want it to be, and I use that metal tip to scribe a line. And you can see here, these lines have all been scribed out for the windows. And then these are the Grant line windows that go in, and it makes it nice and easy for that X-Acto blade to find that groove and make those openings. And because these windows set in, some of the openings, they don't have to be exact. I have a little bit of wiggle room, like what, thousandth of an inch or so. And in scale, that's huge. All right, so the dowel caliper trick there, I use that all the time. I don't think I could do this kind of work without it. Sometimes I'll take a window like this and I'll kind of chop it up to make a window like that. And because I wanted to use the big windows on the front of this double Camelback, but it needed to have a little attic window too. So I kind of mimicked the design of the window. And you can see all my scratches and scrapes on here where the window is going to be cut out. Some of the mistakes that I made, a lot of that stuff gets covered up. Some of it doesn't, but it just adds to the character of the house, right? So there's my little window, little attic window there. And the other windows below down here will be these windows. And sometimes I turn them upside down because I like how they look. I like the, looks like it has a little cornice at the top. So sometimes they're right side up, sometimes I turn them upside down. This is an HO scale arched window from Grant Line. And all I needed was this top part, because this little arch happened to match that little opening right there pretty well. So here's another little arched detail on this other double Camelback. So they're starting to each have their own style, you see. And here are the building fronts and some of the walls and sides for the Camelbacks and double shotguns and shotguns. You can see on these shotguns, they're all the same size, but each one is different. That's just how the builders would do it. Each house has a little different feature to it. These are Grant Line and Ratio parts. Ratio parts, it's a brass company. But I put all the parts in, all the windows together here. Here are the Camelbacks on this side. And each one of the Camelbacks also has a different front. But on the sides will all be the same. The sides and the backs, they're all identical, but the fronts are all different. And starting to assemble them. And I just put a little square of styrene in the corner, just enough to glue it in. I didn't want to do that one yet. And down here at the bottom, see how this is still sticking out, because that's where the foundation is going to go. You can kind of see how the construction is put together there. It's just styrene, pretty simple. Some of the edges are beveled. These all have corner pieces, corner columns in there that the walls glue into. That's typical wood siding construction. These are all wood. I'm going to make another Camelback next that has brick, but that'll be in a little while. Adding some porches and steps to the Camelbacks here. They have these nice long side porches, most of them. One of them doesn't. And here I'm using the dowel caliper to measure exactly how long that piece of foundation needs to be. So the nice thing about this is I'm not actually using a ruler trying to measure this thing and find a little mark on the ruler. I just set this to the size it needs to be, just measure it right off of here, and there you go. So I don't have to physically measure anything with a ruler and try to get exact. And I'll bevel those little pieces a little bit so they fit better. Here, some of the fancy columns on the front of the house, and I just took a piece of styrene and stuck it in a little pin vise and used a sharp file to cut some little designs into the columns, kind of like a little mini lathe. Didn't take that long. I think I only broke one while I was doing it. And I think I have two of them with the round columns like this, and a couple have square columns. And because I only have to do one, they don't have to be the same. You know, it's not like I'm making five. They have to be exact. And the chimneys, I wrapped some, this is plastruck brick around a square piece of styrene, glued it in. I would wrap a little piece of brick around the top to make the little top of the chimney and just chop them off in my Northwest Shoreline chopper. And again, this is a great tool to have because then they're all about the same size. And I can start to glue them in. I like putting little bitty features on the houses. These are the starts of the electrical meters. And I glued the little styrene rod in the middle of a little block, and I made it intentionally longer just to make it easier to handle. After it's glued on the side of the building, I take a little sanding stick and just sand it off. This is a bending jig that I built to bend the electrical conduit, so it's always the same, and then I'll trim it off here once I got it on the house. But it's nice having that little extra handle there to give you something to hold on to, and then I trim it later on. But I think these little features make it look nice, and with this jig, I can very quickly build bend the same one 5 or 6 times so they're all identical. And gutters, I do gutters the same way, and downspouts. The gutters are just styrene channel. And you see this one has a little opening right here too. So for the shorter ones, they bend through here and the longer ones bend around here. And then I have my downspouts there all bent up. I use jigs a lot like that. I like using jigs. It makes it real easy to repeat the same part over and over again. And it doesn't take that long to build the jig. Coal chute doors, again, just a little piece of plastic that I sanded off, beveled a little bit, glue them on the foundation. There's your coal chute. You can see the electrical meter here. And then for the weatherhead, which would be here, they always have those big eye bolts on the side of the building where all the wires from the poles come in first. So that's what they'll do. That'll be this, and then it will loop over to the weatherhead to go down into the electrical conduit. And mailboxes. Again, little bitty pieces of plastic glued on the front of a building. Now it's a mailbox. And they're different shapes and sizes because different people would have a different mailbox on the front of the house. But that little bitty thing, it shows up when you finally paint them all. And here the house is basically all assembled, little chimneys in place, roofs are put on. These are, you can see the difference in the roof styles on these Camelbacks, but the floor plan is exactly the same on all of them. Now for the roof, Chris Broughton turned me on to places called websites like textures.com. And these are just roof textures that I got from them. And you can kind of see they do repeat ever so often. But I would put them together, again, using Apple's Pages, which is a nice graphics tool, but you can use Photoshop or any kind of program like that to do this. And these 3 roofs are all the same, but you can go in and adjust the color on these programs. So I don't have to do this roof 3 times to do it once. I just change the color. And these are the ridge pieces here that I had to fabricate by putting the shingles together into a long strip. This is for one of the houses that has a roof that goes in on an eave or a gable. An eave, I guess. I guess I'm saying that right. Then you print it out and trim it off. And because I had a standard size for my buildings, I only had to make 3 different sizes of roof. One for the Camelback, one for the shotgun, one for the double shotgun. So I'm not having to keep doing this over and over again. I just make it once, trim them off, and then cut out the holes for the chimneys. You can see when you bend the paper, you get a little bit of a white crack in there, but later on I'll go with some craft paints. And also those ridge caps will help cover that. And they're just glued on the house. I did put smear a little paint around here so if anything showed through and around the edges there, so if something showed through, it wouldn't show up so much. Try to match the color of the roof with that. And those little paper roofs look really nice. It looks like they have a lot of detail, but they're dirt cheap and easy to do. And I'm putting in, I use a little jig here little clear plastic jig with 2 holes in it for different locations of the roof vents, because out of the kitchen and the bathroom, some of these houses have inside bathrooms and some don't, depending on what the owner decided they wanted to do. But even those little tiny roof vents make a difference in the details. Here's some of the roofs with weathering. Some of them are newer roofs, some are older. And after they were weathered, I brushed on a little dull coat. Then I went online and went curtain shopping. And I would go to, I don't know, any place, Target or whatever, that sold curtains, and take the pictures, printed them out on clear acetate, and then painted some white behind it so that they would show up a little bit more. And then you look over here, you can see the curtains in the windows. The interiors, only one house is really going to have any kind of interior. This one right here, you can see the doors open, and I have a little interior in there and have a little bit of lighting. These houses have some lighting, but not too much. And for the window panes, I use crystal clear. It gives a really nice effect and looks like those window panes that are in the windows themselves. And right here, you can see a little glob of crystal clear on the meter, so it looks like a little glass face on it. That just takes a second to glob a little of that crystal clear on there. And here are the houses as they're sitting on the street down in the Butchertown area. This is on my little corner module. It's a pretty small module. It's 18 inches on one end, 24 on the other, and it just makes a 45-degree turn. You can see how the houses lay out over here. And future location for a little cafe and another nicer house I'll build, but they lay out along the street right there. And this was an earlier picture, just trying to get the houses in the right spot. Oh, here's the cafe that's going to go on the corner. I just finished it. It's all scratch built, and it's just a nice little Cuban-style coffee house that wound up in Butchertown for some odd reason. I've got a backstory to it, but that's what I just finished last night, actually. So that's shotguns and Camelbacks. And I think there's 13 of them all together. And it makes a nice little area for my module, which is a Butchertown part of town. So that's it.
Very nice. Very nice. I see this kind of work and I say to myself, well, maybe I'm really not a modeler.
Hey, Paul, what material did you use for your electrical conduits? Is that phosphorus bronze? Or?
Yeah, that's just the stuff. You know, Brian sells that stuff in a store in those little tubes, and yeah, it's just
it's a tissue phosphorus bronze.
Yeah, exactly. That's all that is.
Okay.
It holds its shape really well. It's easy to cut, easy to work with. Yeah.
Okay. Nicely done, as always.
Solders well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That one window that you modified for the attic
Yeah.
wall that you cut, do you do something to try and cover up the cut, or you just neatly put it to glue it back together?
Well, I'll glue it together, and sometimes just the styrene will ooze over to fill in the gap. But I also use that. I think it's that lily putty.
Little putt.
Yeah, little putt. That's great stuff. I love that. It never dries out the tube. It has that long applicator tip. Brian sells it in the store. It's fantastic, and it's great for those little gaps and stuff that you're always going to have.
What's it called again? The putty?
It's a little metal tube, and Brian sells it in with all his glues and things. So it's a putty. It's a putty made of marble dust and something to hold it all together. But it holds shape really nicely, and then you can shape it, sand it, paint it.
I'm going to have to look for that.
Yeah.
Always do stuff like that.
Yeah, it's great. And like I said, I've had this tube for a couple of years, and it never dries out. It never hardens inside the applicator. I've never had a problem with it. It's great stuff.
Available at Scale Reproductions.
Yep.
Any other quick questions here before we move on? Okay.
All right.
Thanks very much again, Paul. All right. So now we're going to visit Mr. Rob Cooper. He lives in E-Town. He's a Southwest Airlines pilot. He's off today, but he usually flies on the weekends, so he can't come to a lot of our meetings, but he's with us today. And there's Mr. Cooper.
All right.
Rob's going to give us a tour of his layout.
All right, guys. So thanks for having me. This is the first time I've done Zoom, so I'm going to try to be as careful as I can. I'm carrying an iPad around. I'm going to flip it between forward and back at me, but mostly forward to look at the layout. About 10 of you know the layout. Been down here several times operating it. I'm going to go ahead and spin things around here briefly. Everybody close their eyes till I get up and move around so you don't get vertigo. But we'll back up and get started here. This is actually the dispatch desk here. And I typically dispatch, got a telephone system. There's an exchange, three number exchange, 6 different telephones throughout the railroad in each town. Got a camera system, so the dispatcher can kind of monitor on any one of the 8 monitors in the main room on where things are and what's going on at the time. And over here's the call board, and unfortunately this was last December's operating session, and that's the guys that ran those numbers at the time. And because of COVID, we've had no other operating sessions. I had a couple of guys down just do some mini sessions, 2 or 3 of them, but no main session since last December. So hopefully when everything's over and get guys back. But the way we do it, and some of you know, we start out about 6 o'clock at night, and Shannon, my girlfriend, she'll put on a big spread of food here, and everybody sit around and eat and have beverages and for about an hour or so. And then just about 7 o'clock, Ron and Fred will go on in the main train room and start getting everything ready back in the classification yard, which in my case is Winchester, Kentucky. So the railroad is mid-1950s L&N between Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is the staging here, represents the north part staging, and goes all the way through central Kentucky, east of Lexington, into south staging, which represents Knoxville and points south. So as we continue on in, go through the tunnel, and this starts the actual railroad. The first town my railroad is Falmouth, Kentucky. Has a couple of industries, coal burning electric plant, got some hoppers there, and got a fire department. I was a volunteer fireman years ago and kind of enjoyed it. So I've actually got 5 fire departments on my railroad. I was more into that than aviation, really. So no airplanes on the railroad, but I've got fire department stuff. This is the farm area. Shannon actually built this, and I thought she did a good job on it. And neither her or I are artistic at all. We've never built a railroad. This is my first one. Been working on it for about 8 years. This represents Kentucky River, and we'll continue on south. And as we come into this area here, we approach the town of Winchester, Kentucky. And this is my version of the classification yard in the 1950s for the L&N in Winchester, Kentucky.
Hey, Rob, before you go on, can you back up a little bit to the left?
I sure can, yes.
Talk about the interchange you have.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've got an interchange here with the C&O Railroad, and a friend of mine, Ed Lawrence in Chicago, which about 15 years ago, he taught me some operations. This is about a 5 or 6 track dead end interchange that goes back to nowhere. But he has the same 6 cars that I have on the interchange in Chicago on his C&O. And after a session, I'll tell him what cars I put on here. And then he tells me what cars he's put on his. And we kind of do a round robin thing where I actually incorporate his C&O into my railroad. And in Winchester, Kentucky, the L&N Railroad did interchange with the C&O in the 50s. So it worked out well. Just happened to get lucky on that. So that's where that comes from. I'd kind of forgotten about that detail. But we've got a 10-track classification yard, and at about 7 o'clock, this is where Ron and Fred go, and they're here till about 9:30. They're running hard. In fact, Shannon tries to come back and gives them something to drink and to eat, and they're so busy they can't hardly do that. But they hit it hard back here the whole evening. Got plenty of shelves. They've even got their own desk here, and actually this information here is the very stuff that they operated last December on. That was all their orders and trains then. And but I got a diesel yard here. This is strictly diesel in the L&N in the 1950s here. And around in one of the other corridors, I've got steam that goes up into the coal branch line. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But this is my representation coming around. There's another firehouse, and it comes on around the downtown Winchester. In the background, up against the backdrop, is the main line continuing southbound. And then we're able to compress some time and distance through this tunnel. We'll run a train in there. We can stop the train in here, and it's a 50 actual miles between Winchester and the next town that I'm modeling, which is Corbin, Kentucky. So we come around to this second corridor, and this is Corbin, and the main line comes out of the mountain there and continues southbound. And Corbin has 8 industries. And this siding and runaround is what takes care of the Corbin Industries. And I think most guys that have operated that can say it's a challenging one. It takes at least an hour just to do the Corbin turn from Winchester over to here. A lot of, there's facing and trailing point both in there. So it's pretty good switching for the guys that like to do that on the railroad. And we'll continue southbound. And then we come into the Corbin coal yard. This is my representation of it. The track closest to me is the continuing southbound towards Knoxville, and then the coal yard. And this is where I represent the roughly 20% steam in the mid-50s L&N had. And I've got just a small roundhouse turntable and some steam engines, steam switcher. As we continue southbound, the track closest to me is continue southbound to Knoxville, and there's a 2.5% grade next to that that continues up, and that represents eastbound, while the lower track continues southbound. So the eastbound track is going up into the coal fields of eastern Kentucky. And this is my rendition of some of the coal miners' homes and the company store. And as that 2.5% grade continues up, it enters the first coal tipple. So a 3-track tipple. I've got this area lit. I've decided not to light any more of the railroad because I don't think with the fluorescent lights on bright enough for everybody to see it operate, you really can't see too much of the lighting of it. They're there, but not a lot of bang for my buck in time, so I've decided not to do any more lighting beyond this corridor. The lower track, as you see, that's the one that continues south towards Knoxville, while the upper track is going east, continuing into the coal fields. Got no hobo camp there, and an old abandoned coal tipple for many years before the 1950s. And then the main line down at the bottom goes around behind this rock quarry. And this is in the town of Lott, Kentucky, just a few miles north of the Tennessee border, north of Knoxville. The upper level continues up in the coal mines. Do have another industry up here for lumber, and then we can pull those trains down to the main line and deliver those to different industries. And the lower one, this is the town of Lott, Kentucky here. It's got just a couple of small industries to switch here. Has a lot oil company, and also the lot freight house. And that lower line there under the bridge is the one that continues to Knoxville. The upper line continues east into the coal fields. And got a cemetery here. And then the second coal tipple, which I've also got it lit, is here. It's a 3-track coal tipple as well. And down at the bottom is the continuation of the southbound line that goes into that tunnel that goes dead end into to Knoxville staging and points south. And the upper tunnel continues east, and I allow it to continue and dead end into Norton, Virginia, in that area there. So it gives east and south both. And this is the end of the operation here. If I want to run continuous trains, as you see, these are dead end tracks, but this last track on the outside, you see it curving here. I've got a bridge I can put across and connect into that side there, and then I can run continuous operation. I've got 225 feet of main line, and it takes about 11 minutes at scale speed to go around. So while I'm working on things, I can actually run a train. And during operating sessions, I keep it down like it is now. Use the RailPro system, which I really like. I started out with Digitrax and had some issues with it, and switched over to something called RailPro. And the guys that have operated here before are familiar with it now, but these are the throttles. They're actually handheld throttles. The entire throttle is the computer. There's no, other than just the 14 volts on the track is all you need. And this thing has its own operating system on each throttle. I have 10 of those, so you can command any one of the 42 engines I've converted over to that system. It's pretty much the railroad in a nutshell. Bob Dawson is allowing me to do a little thing for the pie card in November, and this is a switching layout I just finished up recently. I've been working on since COVID. Gave me something to do, so it's there'll be a pie card right up on that with a few photos and in the November pie cards. I really won't talk about that today, but just something a little extra for additional guys to operate while we're here. So let me get back around and sit down, and hopefully quit messing or quit moving around so much to make people dizzy. Get it stopped here, and we'll see if anybody has any questions.
Let me go ahead and unmute folks. Rob, so do we have any questions? I'll have a question. Could you say a few words about the construction of your basement there?
Yeah, what I did when I had the house built 8 years ago, my contractor, when you saw the 3 corridors in there and then the staging room, and I was having my contractor go through, and I was telling him exactly what widths and lengths I wanted for those. And he kept scratching his head. He said, "Are you sure you want this? This just does not make any sense at all." I said, "Yeah, I do. I do." And he built it. I'd go on a flying trip. I'd come back and it wouldn't be exactly what I wanted. I said, "No, it has to be this way." So he changed it and finally got it right. And about 2 years after I started building the railroad, I had him come back, and then he saw what I was after, he just could not grasp why I wanted these 3 corridors like that. He said it reminded him of bowling for midgets or something. But he finally got it once he saw the railroad under construction. So that was a little bit of tug and pull on that, but it worked out good. So I was fortunate enough. I knew I wanted into this hobby thanks to my friend in Chicago, Ed Lawrence, which I do the interchange with. About 8 years prior to me starting to build this, I had been operating his railroad several times. Some of his friends in Chicago, I would go up a day early before I began my trips and operate some of the really good railroads in Chicago, and picked up some things on it and was able to at least begin this railroad here, and then continuation with help from Russell and some things, and know what to do and what not to do. I finally kind of got it to where it is today, and really happy with it.
Any other questions about the railroad?
Hey, I don't have a question, but I have a comment, and that's that for those of you who've not been down there, try to arm wrestle Rob into an invitation after we can go and visit. It's a fun layout to operate. There are a lot of small areas that you can, as Rob was saying, really get focused on and spend a lot of time in there. Ron and I are busy back in that yard from, as Rob said, from a little before 7 to a little after 9:30. We basically turn the railroad on and shut out the lights because nothing happens until it pretty much leaves that yard and comes back into that yard. And then there's also another switching district in there that we run 1, 2, 3 jobs out of as well. So there have been times when it's been Ron and Fred in the yard running, marshaling trains, and then we have a third person in there actually running the locals. So it's busy back there.
Yeah, it is fun to go back as the guy that built this thing and put all the time and effort in it, to go back and watch and listen to you guys and think, yeah, this is working. It's actually doing what I was hoping it would do. And I hear guys talking railroad jargon, and they're doing it, and it's working out great. And then I got a couple of through freights that go through to keep the main line active, and it's fun. And then I get to dispatch it out here, and the phone rings off the hook sometime. And it's become a lot of fun. And, it's good. So
The one thing you didn't show us, Rob, is that little utility area district. But you know what? Save that for next time. And also you can give us a good look at the switching layout behind you as well. That'll be a nice, good 15, 20-minute presentation too. Leave them wanting something.
Yeah. I have to say that Rob's Railroad is extremely well organized. You know, we've been to some places to operate, and it's really difficult to get a grip on what's happening. But he's color coded. He's got clipboards. He's very, very well organized and an excellent dispatcher. Well run operation.
Thank you. I enjoy it. And a great bunch of guys get to come down there. It's really nice too. And I hope once all this COVID thing's over, maybe sometime next year we can get back going on it again.
Yes, sir.
By the way, Bruce McKinnon, I see him there. He came down early summer and helped me initially on, we did a run on the switching layout behind me, which we'll do in the future, but he helped me kind of get the idea of what we need to do and not do on it. And we changed a few things. And once I got that down, then I started doing the scenery. So Bruce helped me on the initial part on that to figure out what worked out. And I'm real pleased with it. And we'll go over that on a future deal.
Well, having had the privilege of running down there, I think the Digitrax versus the RailPro is a really interesting point all unto itself. I think Rob was one of the guys that beat on Digitrax enough when he was having all of his trouble that kind of convinced Digitrax they better get off their backsides and do some more R&D on their whole way of doing things. And they have since updated, upgraded, and changed virtually everything that they used to have. And I think it's situations like Rob's and Russ's that help convince those folks that they were sitting on their laurels about a year and a half or 2 years too long. But the RailPro system is incredible. It's a radio control system is what it really is. And it works like magic. I mean, it takes all of about 4 minutes to go from knowing nothing to operating trains. It's very, very user-friendly. It's an amazing system.
Yeah, but you know, like we talked about with any system, even the NCE, there's always some drawbacks. And I was just saying to Steve here that the one thing drawback that Rob found out pretty quick was that the RailPro system is extremely sensitive to dirty track. So
Yes. So what I had to do there on all 42 engines, I've converted to the RailPro decoder, which is kind of a drawback to RailPro. You have to put their decoder in because it's not using a local net system at all. All that's, there's nothing there. It's strictly radio control between the handheld and that engine. And so in addition to ripping the old decoders out and putting RailPros in, I had to go back later and install a Keep Alive. So now the Keep Alive will run for about 10 seconds with no power going over a bad section. So it helped that a tremendous amount, but it was frustrating until I got that. Once it was in, then I'm very happy with the system. Would I do it over again? Probably not. I'd probably go with NCE like Russell did. I love his system. He and I changed from Digitrax the same time. He went NCE, I went RailPro. It was much simpler to go NCE because it was very similar to Digitrax. For RailPro, I had to change everything. It's changed now. I love it. Don't know if I'd do it again because of all the work it took, but it does work well.
Hey, Rob,
Yes.
you can take this as high praise for me, but you know, you really wouldn't have to twist my arm a whole lot to I'd be happy to get an invite to come down next time you have an operating session.
Well, like I said, the switching layout behind me, the nice part is it's going to allow a couple of more operators to do things. I was always sensitive to not wanting too many guys at one time, just to sit around and I didn't want people to get bored. I know a lot of guys like to sit around and talk, but I wanted guys to stay as active as they wanted to. And the switching layout behind me, I think, is going to fill the bill on that. Two guys can operate that for 30 minutes. Then they can get off, switch the car cards, and two guys can operate it 30 more minutes. So that really will allow me at least not to feel like people aren't able to do enough. If we've got a dozen guys here, it gives more opportunity. So I think that's going to help a lot. But I will definitely keep that in mind whenever we are able to get back together.
Thank you.
Oh, we are running a little long here, so we're in no hurry to log off. Anybody that needs to leave can gracefully exit without a problem. But as long as there's questions going on, and
It won't
we
burst out the glass.
can continue on for a few minutes. So is there any other questions, comments for Rob?
Well, the only thing I can say is I like working Corbin, but then those pesky through trains come through there and kind of mess you up.
Dude, Chris, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, you did. You worked that one night. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy that. You know, it's never the same. I've done it, I think, more than once. It's really never the same because your consist changes what you're going to be doing anyway.
It does. You know, I've got 5 turns on the railroad. I've got the local and I've got about 6 through freight. So it's a busy, as Fred said, it's a very busy evening, but it's fun.
Yes, it is.
Any other comments, questions?
Rob, have you any particular comments about car cards?
You know, I like them. They seem to work well. I've got mine color coded like Russell does. He and I actually program the same time for the guys that have operated Russells, and it kind of color codes so you can glance at that and see at least what direction it goes on the railroad and what town. I do enjoy that. If you've done Russells, you've done mine as far as car cards are concerned. I love them. They seem to keep things organized well. Something else I do is I'll have these small clipboards here, and I actually, whoever's doing the different jobs, I hand them this clipboard. It's all written out, and they just carry this clipboard and they just read number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, in order. This is exactly what you do on your turn or your through train or whatever. And there's no question. It's big font. I got rid of all the small print that no one cares about. They don't want to know what commodities on it. We're you know, an operating session. They look, this has to go from here to here. And I think those small clipboards with few words, exactly what they need to know. That way I don't have to keep getting up off the dispatch desk and answering many questions. They kind of know their job, you know, a few minutes before we start. It seems to work pretty well.
Thank you.
Okay, friends, I think that'll wrap it up. We just a reminder at the general meeting next week, we'll have Mr. Frank Rohn will join us. He didn't join us today, but he's going to be doing how to add a scene to a layout in 15 easy steps, which ought to be interesting. Thanks everyone for attending today. We had a nice turnout, I'll have to say, and we'll hope to see you all next Saturday at the general meeting.